tips paper?
Not today. We weren't really going to do it in public, were we?
You don't do it afterwards then? That's what we're now. Sure.
I'm more than happy to.
Will you remind me to end the meeting? Let's just close the meeting and then don't do it.
Yeah, no, okay.
I know. Thanks for morning, Stuart. Okay, members, the meeting's been declared open to the public. Could I formally welcome everybody here this morning to the committee? Social development. The usual housekeeping. Could I just advise members about the use of their electronic tablets, and to say that when the meeting concludes after AOB, they're going to ask Stephen to take members through some of his top tips, which he's been very eager and willing to deliver to members. So we promised him we'll let him in this morning at some point. So we'll do that when the meeting's formally over to the public. It'll only take a few minutes. Again, just remind members then about the use of their tablets just during meeting times, because I've asked everybody in the room then to switch off all their other electronic devices, telephones and so on. Many members to declare anything relevant, any interest relevant to the agenda. Need to do that. Being declared, then we move on then. Thank you. Moving on to apologies. We have apologies from Sammy Wilson and Jim Allister. Any other apologies to record? None. Moving on then to draft minutes, page 5 of your pack. Just to approve the minutes for accuracy. Are members content to approve the minutes for the meeting on the, what date was that?
8th of May.
What date? 8th of May. Okay, members. So all agreed on the minutes? Thank you. And the next item, chairperson's business. There's nothing specific to draw your attention to. Then move on to matters arising. Just to advise members then that the pavement cafes bill, which was passed by the Assembly on the 7th of April, has received royal assent on Monday the 12th of May and will be now known as the licensing of pavement cafes bill. We'd be pleased to hear that. Remind ourselves then the committee had agreed that we meet next Monday on the 19th of May at 1:15. That was an attempt to reschedule the meeting away from the election day, given other pressures a member will be under. Just to make it, I suppose, make members aware, there's really no substantive items for the agenda. We couldn't reschedule any of the department or other briefings in time, but that kind of short notice. So you'll have really no paperwork to deal with or no any significant business to deal with. So in real terms, you'll be meeting for the sake of it. So members had agreed initially that we would meet at 1:15 and try to deal with the business as quickly as possible. As you know, the Assembly has a limited session on plenary, but it also has 4 ministerial oral question times. So quite a number of members tied up in the question period. So members content then we just abandon the attempt to have that meeting. There's no purpose really to it in terms of any substantive business.
Yeah.
So members content then that we don't have that meeting on Monday then?
Great.
Okay, thank you. That meeting is now cancelled. Thank you. Next item, number 5 on the agenda, is the Housing Sector Modernisation Programme, and we have a briefing from the Housing Sector officials, and we have a number of representatives here this morning. Can I formally welcome you all here this morning? We have Donald Hoodless, the chairperson. You're very welcome, Donald. Yes, please do. Mrs. Mags Lightbody, the interim chief executive, and Jerry Flynn, director of Housing and Communities. Could I formally welcome the 3 of you? I know Donald hadn't initially intended to be in here. You weren't able to make it, but you are here. I think at your own short notice. So
Yes.
appreciate you for being here this morning. I mean, obviously, as you're all aware, I mean, Mag was here last week and we had some reference to this. Obviously, you're here to present on the modernisation programme that you're currently engaged in. I think in principle members would welcome that and want to hear more of the detail of it. There has been concerns expressed by a number of members that they were worried about, let's be fair about it and let's be honest about it, people were worried about, is there a fait accompli been worked here, is there another agenda, is there a stealth delivery of outcomes that haven't been agreed elsewhere. So I'm just putting that on the record for the meeting. But We very much look forward to hearing your presentation this morning, and then obviously members will ask whatever questions they want to address on the back of your presentation. So again, you're formally very welcome here, and thank you for being here this morning. Leave it to yourselves.
Thank you very much for the invitation. We're extremely grateful because we want to tell you about what we're doing in order to restore the reputation and what we're doing to make that happen. And so we're very committed to it. We are on a journey to excellence. And if I may, I want to start with the board, my role and how we've changed there, which leads into what Mags is going to talk about on the journey to excellence with staff. When I arrived, which is now 18 months ago, I was confronted by a set of ball papers which were this thick, over 500 pages. The board members had to read a Dickens novel over the weekend, effectively. And there was no way the board could see the wood from the trees. All they were doing was rubber stamping what was put before them because it was too fast. And I'm very clear, and I'm sure you're very clear, that the role of the board is to approve plans, develop the strategy and the direction of travel of the board, of the executive, to set down the standards of performance that it has to meet, uphold its values, and engage in constructive challenge. Now, in order to do that, we had to look at the scheme of delegation, because everything was being passed upwards for decision by the board, and what we said, no, that is wrong. Decisions have to be made at the right level. There has to be delegation downwards to staff, which is what the journey to excellence, which Mags is going to talk about in a minute, will go into in more details. The other key change which we made, which will address some of the concerns that were raised by you in the opening remarks, was we're looking at the landlord and the regional business. And the reason we're doing that, it's quite straightforward. We want to focus on the activities of the executive, the different activities that we have. The landlord is probably it is the biggest public landlord in the United Kingdom. It's probably the biggest social landlord in the United Kingdom. It's a huge social business. And what we need to do is to look at its performance as a whole, to look at how it's doing. Now, I have to say to you, it actually performs very well. It's got very good tenant satisfaction levels. But when you look at it as a body, as a landlord, you can pick out things that perhaps there's room for improvement. And I think I mentioned once before about reletting a vacant property. When I arrived, it was 40-odd days, 8 weeks, relet a vacant property when people were in need. We've got it down to 29, but we can do better. So by looking at the landlord's performance overall, we're able to see which of the areas we should be improving and which we're doing well. So that's a key reason for the change. And the other reason is, in recent years, that there's been a lack of innovation by a housing executive. It was always the leader in doing things very well, but in recent years, it's lost that edge. And we want to restore that. And let me just give examples. Tenants who've been previously homeless very often don't have any furniture. If they take up their tenancy, they're due to pay rent, but sometimes they don't move in because they've got no furniture, so they've got to get it together from different people. But housing benefits not paid until they've moved in. They have rent arrears. And so what we've said to our officers is, why don't you look at furnished tenancies so that that tenants have got facilities to start their new lives. Now, this may happen, it may not happen, but it's an example of us as a board now beginning a constructive challenge with officers to see where we can make improvements in the services that we give to tenants. Other issues that we've now picked up and moved on, choice-based lettings, I think we could do more. We've started to look at that. I know perfectly well that all of you are very good at social media, but I wonder, and we wonder, as a constructive challenge, whether the housing executive is using social media enough to contact its tenants and to actually use that more positively. So there are examples that by concentrating and looking at what the landlord's doing, we can give greater attention to those areas that can need improvement. Now, a similar issue, again, is focus around the regional. I'll just pick 2 examples because you could go over all our work. Supporting people, it's a big programme, it's £70 million a year. I've been out and seen some great schemes. But is it enough? By looking at the whole programme of supporting people, we can then look to see whether the balance between scheme-based care and home care is right. We can look to see whether the balance between different vulnerable groups is right, that we're using our resources most effectively. So the object of us looking at it in this way is to focus on the whole picture, to see where the gaps are, where the problems and issues are, and how we can improve to make the service more effectively. So again, and my final example would be on housing and regeneration. The regional role is on regeneration. The housing executive has been quite passive about that. But as you know, you've got elections next week. You'll have local councils who will have a responsibility for regeneration. We, therefore, have to focus on how we develop our relationship with the new local councils in order to take regeneration forward. So, so the reason for the change has been we focus on all these activities more clearly rather than having a muddled agenda which jumps from one thing to another. So that's where we are. That's what we're doing as a board. The issue about us delegating responsibility back to staff, for them to be accountable for what they do, is what the journey to excellence is about. And I'm going to pass over to Mags, if that's all right, for her to explain in more detail that programme of activity.
Thank you, Don. Morning, Max.
Morning. Thank you, Chair. And I probably last week gave a wee bit of a flavour of the work that we've been undertaking. In the back of the board decision then to give the attention and governance lines to our 2 big distinct roles of major landlord and also the regional body. Since I arrived at the organisation, we've been working then on how we properly occupy those 2 big spaces and make sure the organisation gets back to delivering excellence. We've badged this journey we're on, Journey to Excellence. When I chat to our staff teams, some are saying to me it's Journey Back to Excellence, Mags, because that's where the housing executive were. I think for me as a housing professional, all my days over the water in Scotland, the housing executive was always known for great things, been through a few difficult years though. So working with the board support and hopefully lots of scrutiny and time with yourselves to share what we're doing along the way. I'd be keen to be back with you to share the positive work we're doing as well over the piece. We've been working with our teams right through the organisation to build what 2014 is going to mean for the housing executive. The decision to create that split, I think, has been very helpful, just to give us some space to get a distinct eye on the 2 big roles. But the kind of strapline we have is still one organisation until politically there's ever any decision to change that. So one organisation, 2 roles, and 1 goal, and that's ensuring everyone has access to decent, affordable housing. I mentioned last week that as we relaunch and try to get the organisation back in a good place, one of our key resources is our people. 3,500 staff across our various functions. And if I look, and I touched on last week some of the satisfaction surveys from our staff, play back a sense of the past few years, kind of needing clarity of direction of the organisation, looking for leadership from the board and also our senior team, and looking to be involved in change. The playback was we don't feel we've been involved in shaping any of the discussions. So I'll probably at the end of my presentation today just drift into social housing reform programme and how we are making sure our staff in our organisation are firmly shaping the thoughts and the processes, because we're the people who run the service today, and hopefully can contribute strongly to any discussions that are happening in that front. But reform may take some time, and I can't predict where those discussions will go, so we have a very serious day job And that's what the Journey to Excellence is about, is getting back to doing the right thing and delivering excellence in all that we do. We launched the programme and I've met with to date well over 2,000 of our 3,500 staff. We're taking everyone, everyone gets a chance to see me, God help them, and half-day sessions with all staff. So they're very clear on the messages, very clear on the various big reforms that might affect in the future what we do, but getting everyone focused on the challenges that exist today. The citizens we serve need us, I would say, more than ever. So how we fulfil and occupy our space as the regional body, looking after the social housing development programme, making sure we have, through our partners, the housing associations, we deliver the new homes that are needed, looking at our homeless responsibility and supporting people, and making sure we get solutions that really deal with those very, very serious issues round about those particular challenges in people's lives. And then into the landlord, making sure we're delivering top quality services there. The Housing Exec, as I say, was award winning. That's where we want it to get back to, recognised for innovation and great ideas. And it was the space until a few years ago that the Housing Executive was in, particularly on its landlord role. The Journey to Excellence on the back of these launch sessions, and I have to say, the sense I have from our staff, the hunger to get back to doing great things, it is immense. I've been blown away by our staff, their appetite to just get back to doing and delivering, and that's been, I would say, unanimous from the sessions we've been to. Staff that have been through changes over the years that have delivered constantly, and probably through some of the challenges still underneath that, delivering on the ground great services. So I'd like to say today, with still some sessions to go, our workforce are absolutely up for just getting back to delivering. We have some detailed work plans sitting behind that launch then, so that it's not just strategies and plans we get into doing right away. So the kind of three big strands of activity will be around about business excellence, customer excellence and people excellence. And those themes working across all that we do, the regional function, the landlord function, and then we'll have a single support services arm where we use our scale and make it count for us. So developing in IT and technology to make that work for both bits of the housing exec, that's where scale can count for an organisation. Business excellence, we've started now with activity to look at our customer journey through the business, from when they first contact us, and that might be to the landlord role, might be to the regional role in homelessness, might be on benefits, and walking through their journey with our organisation. What we'll do as we go through that process is really start to strip out as much as we can the bureaucracy, the bits that don't add value for the business or for the customer, and make sure our resources as we come out of that focus on what our customers need, nothing more, nothing less. Through that process, this is a lot of the work that I did in Glasgow. We'll be able then to direct resources back around the customer. I would say today we've got an awful lot of our resources tied up in process and bureaucracy. That's a lot of what staff are telling us, and we want to flip that balance, get the proportion of staff required back out in the communities. I met this week, for example, with our Central Housing Forum, representatives from all our community groups. They were saying we still love what you do. We hear from staff though, they do feel a bit hemmed in and not being able to do the right thing for us. And we want to see more staff back in the patch, back over the door. Because for the business we're in, that's where we can help most, not behind desks. So that's a lot of the work we'll do, is just to simplify our processes and get staff back where it counts, making every pound that we spend really add value. Customer excellence, we've spent lots of time and we go through customer service excellence for our landlord role. Just completed another assessment by the former Charter Mark Customer Service Excellence. Verbal feedback was very positive, again, around our landlord. We'll have the full report in May, but we want that same discipline to apply to everything that we do, internal services as well. Our accountants, our IT, all of those back office services should all focus on what the customer needs. And we want to drive that same approach into our suppliers. Not only doing the right thing, but get the behaviours of everyone in the organisation and everyone who does business in our name customer focused. If we look at our landlord role, suppliers are over the door as often as our own staff are, so they need to be doing business in our name the way that we expect all of our staff to behave. So we'll be working with our contractors over this piece as well, to develop and deliver customer first programmes that we're always doing the right thing, right first time, and making our customers feel valued. Sometimes that slips, and it's something again that has to be an imperative for every transaction with our customers. Our people, as we mentioned, are an important resource. Staff that touch the customer will often drive how customers feel about us. A big task, and we touched on it in our governance activity, one of the tasks we haven't made enough progress on is working through succession plans for the organisation. Great staff in our business, but if we look at the age profile in our organisation, we have over 30% of our staff over 50. Over 55 indeed. And those staff, much as I would like to keep them with us forever to help us on this journey, some will be able to choose to leave, will be able to access pension entitlements, and will be able to choose to leave us. And until now, we haven't had proper plans to prepare the organisation to gather all that intelligence, all that memory from those staff and prepare us for the next 40 years. So we've been to the board with the first cut of our staff profiles, and we're now working over the coming years, because this isn't a quick fix, over the coming years, how we'll restructure our organisation to make sure we've got the right people in the right place, and also again to make sure we reshape the business to get it back to what a strong regional body and a very good top performing landlord should look like. I did a lot of this work in Glasgow Housing Association. Again, will be a few iterations on that, and we're working closely with our trade unions on that journey. They're absolutely signed up to where we want to go, and we'll be hand in hand to bring our staff with us as we move through that period. IT has a big part to play, so sitting in amongst those business, customer and people strategies will be how we make technology work for us. Work for us to modernise the business, but work for us as well to let our customers engage with us in a way and at a time and place and manner that suits them. I share with our staff to do business with us online just now is not as easy as it should be. So we'll invest in technology, and that's the bit again of one organisation using its scale and clout to get cutting edge technology that helps staff be out from behind the desk, out in the community with all their information on IT, but customers able to engage with us through that on the easy things, and then creating enough resource that there's a lot of what we do has to have face-to-face in our offices, but out in the community and over the door. So that's the theme of where we're going as an organisation. We've got a lot to do. There's a lot of detailed work plans sit behind that. But I'd like to give Social Development Committee comfort today. Our staff are up for it. We have the full support of our board. We're working with trade unions. We've been to Housing Council. I think everyone is excited about the prospect of the Housing Exec getting back to delivering, and that's what, as your acting Chief Exec, I'm committed to do and be held accountable by this man to deliver all that I'm discussing with you today. Happy to take any questions, and would be really keen to come back and engage with you through this process to let you know how we're getting on and hear your views.
Thank you, Max. Could I just ask 2 points before opening up the members? Is 2 points are really, you're in terms of investing in our stock. In your paper, you refer to what might help to close the gap around investment would be more fundamental reform. I'm not sure whether you're offering that as an intention or just a statement of fact. And your paper fairly clearly outlines what the regional services are, but less definitive in terms of what the landlord service. And I know you've addressed, both of you have addressed it to some extent so far. So you maybe elaborate a little bit more on what the landlord services might actually be, if you have a clear view in mind, because obviously I think you've given some very clear indication there about getting the staff and the officials back out again. So what does that actually really mean in terms of the overall services you envisage for the landlord?
Let me pick those through. The investment issues, as you'll be aware from your social housing reform programme discussions, we're working with the department to quantify what we need. We have been under-investing in our stock. And that's a lot of what I'm hearing from our customers in terms of investment plans going forward. So we're working with them to kind of quantify that figure and what we're going to need to deliver for our customers. They're paying us rent, they expect services now and in the future. So we have some gaps round about that, and I think your message to the social housing reform programme is work away on options and bring us back options to bridge that gap, including retaining within public sector and how good can we do. The work we're doing on excellence will hopefully start to bridge some of that, really again driving efficiency into all that we do, but we're early in the process and we're round the table to bring our expertise to those discussions. As we move through in terms of regional and landlord functions, they do overlap considerably. I say in terms of our staff, a customer coming to our door won't differentiate. So although we're structured in regional and landlord, we're trying through this redesign piece to create a front end of the service that's seamless. A customer shouldn't know they're dealing with different bits of the organisation. But the landlord will be focused solely on looking after the 88,000 tenancies that we have. So working with our customers in those houses and the customers that are queuing to get in those houses to make sure we let the houses properly, we collect the rent properly, we look at investing and repairing in those houses properly. So that landlord role should be at the forefront in terms of the investment need and how we fund and finance that. We also need to look at, I described kind of bricks and mortar is essential, but a good landlord has to be thinking of more than that. So if we think on what our landlord does to do, we work with community groups, with voluntary sector to get the Housing Plus type agenda out there. Looking at things going forward, and Donald has touched on some of that, the extra services that a tenant needs to be able to live happily in their home. So the landlord will be working across into regional, but out to community and voluntary sector and public partners on how to make sure services are wrapped around the tenant. There's lots we can do more on there, and I think we've got a good solid track record on landlord in that. I think Donald mentioned on performance, good improvements in our landlord performance this year, but our goal in terms of excellence is to be best in class comparing in Northern Ireland but also in other jurisdictions. So that's part of our journey and part of what helps bridge gaps. The more efficient we are as a landlord, the more we can reinvest back in the stock. So some distinction to those roles, but you're right, for customers, you'll have a customer that potentially is homeless, needs a house. Landlord is one of the options there. Perhaps there's supporting people needs as well. So we'll create in the housing exec a kind of seamless process that the customer gets the bits of the business coming to them to wrap around and give solution. We really don't want to come out of this with you have to chap 3 doors to get a solution in the organisation. Within one housing exec, we can do that.
Can I come back on the investment? One of the most interesting things that we did when we split it, and we split the budgets, and what came through very clearly was the regional side that got all the capital monies for new housing, for disabled grants, When we look at the landlord, it's got a tiny capital programme for dealing with disability, adapting homes. Nothing to reinvest in the stock at all. And that was because it did it through right to buy sales, which crashed in 2007. So we have no capital investment in our stock since 2000 investment. We've got a lot of revenue monies, because we'll come back and talk about it, but no capital monies. So if we want to do thermal insulation, do the tower blocks, there's no money. And I think what I'm concerned to do as chairman is, in a sense, to raise those problems with you as politicians about finding us that money so that we can actually give tenants decent homes. It's our job to be at the forefront of representing tenants to make certain that they've got what they want, a decent home. And there are a lot of the tower blocks which require significant investment. There's the no-fines housing. There's the properties that are down for stock transfer, which are in a terrible condition, which at the moment the Housing Association is not interested in. We have to do something about that. So the challenge that, in a sense, we have as a public landlord is to come to you and say, can we have some public money to actually invest, capital monies to invest in our stock? Because it's needed now. As far as I'm concerned, the housing executive is the housing executive. It's my job to make certain it delivers for its tenants, it delivers the services for the whole Northern Ireland community, and that's what we'll concentrate on. The social housing reform programme will go on, you'll discuss it, but our task is to actually make certain the housing executive delivers on the services that it's charged to do. That's what we want. And in delivering those services, we will have to come and ask you for resources to do it.
Okay, Don, thanks for that. I mean, that would certainly give me a little bit of encouragement that the executive would be moving from what I would have seen the executive in more recent times to almost like an observer rather than a landlord with responsibility to his tenants, which in my view you do need to be an advocate on behalf of. So I'll be pleased to hear that. Maggie Brady, first of all, and then Dolores.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. And just reading in the conclusion of your paper, our Journey to Excellence programme gives us the opportunity to restore our reputation, change recent perceptions, regain trust and prepare for the future. It lets us best deliver the housing needs of our citizens, which is encouraging. But just, I want to raise this with you because it was something that came up yesterday. Actually, a constituent brought this letter into our office. And in terms of journey forward and the modernisation, it starts off by talking about housing stock transfer proposal. That the Minister has announced a stock transfer programme which may see some 2,000 housing executive dwellings transferred to housing associations in order that major improvement work can be carried out. It goes on to say that his dwelling is one of those. It talks about the executive's current funding situation. It is now unable to complete this improvement programme, and there is no possibility of this work being carried out in the foreseeable future. Now, it's my understanding that in the last financial year, the housing executive handed back a huge amount of money, quite a bit, which was for maintenance. So, obviously, it's difficult for the tenant to understand that. It goes on to talk about the pilot scheme. Presumably, that was Rinmore, following a successful pilot scheme, and that stock transfer is the most appropriate way to achieve this. It then goes on to talk about this being rolled out over a 3-year period up to 2016. The difficulty, I think, for the tenant is very simple. He's being told that if he doesn't transfer, he's not going to get any work done. He's going to be presumably in a dwelling that's going to deteriorate. The other difficulty he has, of course, and this is someone in benefit, so housing benefit presumably, but there'll be more rent charge because housing associations charge. There's no rent convergence as such. Housing associations charge more. I'm just wondering. I mean, this, when you read it, sounds like a fait accompli. So I'm just wondering how often or how many of these stock transfers are taking place. You know, because obviously the tenant came to us because he's worried about it. He's been a housing executive tenant for probably about the last 30, 40 years. Has suddenly been confronted with this, which is basically telling them if you don't do this, and it talks about a tenant's ballot and all the rest of it, what if they vote against it? Does that mean they're not going to get any maintenance then? Because that's the inference. I'm just wondering how often this has happened, how many of these schemes are being proposed, because I know it may not be that, well, it is relevant to actually what you're saying today in terms of moving forward in a journey of excellence, because in his case, if he doesn't go to a housing association, he certainly will not be in a journey of excellence. He'll be in a journey of, I suppose, the fact that his dwelling is going to deteriorate. And this is in a scheme where actually there are high-rise flats in Uri. The majority of them have been knocked down. This particular block was kept because it was probably in the best condition, and yet, you know, this is going to continue to deteriorate because planned maintenance is not going to be carried out. So I'm just wondering what the situation is. Also, it raises, because obviously I would want to pursue this through the committee and find, you know, we need to get more detail on how often this is happening, and because really it seems that the housing sector is shipping people off to housing associations. And that seems to be what it's all about, stock transfer. And you talked about 88,000, well in this case if there's 2,000 it'll only be 86, and then it'll continue in the downward spiral. I'm just wondering about that.
Well, can I pick it up? There is a stock transfer programme which we have, of about 2,500 units. It's there because we don't have the money, the capital money I've just been talking about. And actually, there are issues that we now need to address and talk to the department about, because housing associations don't think they can find the money either. They don't find an attractive proposition. And we can't leave those tenants in poor housing. So we're going to have to go back to the department and talk about that stock transfer programme. How can we get investment in them? Because they need it. Mr. Bridge, quite right. We need it. They need it. The other thing is we did give lots of money, revenue money. We have argued that can we transfer some of this revenue money to capital? But DFP, I think it was, didn't like that. But there is an issue, I think, that we're running programmes like kitchens and double glazing. And that's a good thing to do. I don't misunderstand me, but actually, it's the fabric of the stock, you know, the basic condition of the stock that we need to invest more in, as you point out on those properties. And we need to find a way of doing that. We need to find a way with you and the department of getting the monies that enable us to make certain that every tenant is living in a decent home, and they're not at the moment. So that's the issue that I want to pursue as time moves forward. How do we make certain that all tenants not only get a good service, which we're on our journey to excellence, but get a good home that goes with it?
But could I just say,
investment delivery machine on that, it has been switched off for a period. We haven't been doing capital. I touched last week on that bit of not handing back money again. So I was this week with all of our new contractors on the planned maintenance contracts, really getting together with them to say we have to deliver, and I want us to work together in how we do that, to first of all give me certainty and then the board that we're going to spend everything that's there, but then look at how we can start to mobilise potentially a big programme again if we could get the money, as there is a bit morally for any of us to say to tenants, you'll have to wait and wait and wait, just isn't palatable. I was out on Monday at one of our multi-storey locations that I just popped out to see and got to talk to some customers. And they're being very patient with us, but it's just not an area we can keep saying, don't know when. And the investment needed in some of our structures has to be proper capital programme. The way we've been doing and just investing to what money was available hasn't been sensible. The way we've structured investment, where a wee bit of this and a wee bit of that, isn't really the way to look after our assets. So that's a big task for us this year. Develop an asset management strategy for all of our homes and an investment plan for 5 years. And then the hard discussion is how we're going to fund it.
could I say just on that, I mean, part of the money that was handed back was for maintenance. Now, here we have a tenant who, as I say, has been a housing sector tenant for probably about 40 years and is left in a very difficult situation. There's a lot of uncertainty. I mean, the man's in benefit now, but he's been working up until relatively recently, so was paying rent and was contributing, but is left in a situation where feels that he's been loyal to the executive, but maybe feels that the executive aren't necessarily being loyal to him because they just seem to be shipping him off. You know, so I think that's something that needs to be addressed
Absolutely.
sooner rather than later.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Maggie. Thank you. Dolores?
Thanks, Chair. Thank you for your presentation. And if it's any encouragement to you, Mags, I'm hearing that staff are very enthused by yourself and feel confident in your ability to deliver. Could I ask around flexibilities in relation to picking up some of Mickey's points, but allowing tenants the opportunity to avail of other energy measures that might be more available, you know, through the private sector? You know, how are they encouraged, and are there systems of flexibilities within the housing executive, you know, for solar panels, for example, that type of thing? And the other bit that was interested in is in it around supporting people, and given, you know, the demographic changes that we're anticipating, and how the housing executive is planning for that.
The solar panels an interesting one. We have a paper, and the WARE board are working 1 month considering the regional issues, kind of strategic issues, and the next the landlord. We've got a paper to next board that kind of straddles both of those issues exactly on solar panels, where a regional body in a research space have been working with proposals to maybe introduce that deals with tenants' fuel challenges. And the place we're looking to do it and pilot is on our own stock. Right. So it's a good example that we've got there of a regional body out exploring these issues. And then in terms of piloting, the regional body will work across all of the tenures, but where we're going to try this first is on our own stock. So that's a bit of the kind of joined up working. It's one housing exec, so we can use all of the research intelligence and then deploy it straight into housing executive stock. Looking at other initiatives, a bit that's been on the agenda for a while is digital connectivity. So we've been doing lots through our tenant end of the business to help our tenants get online. But a big goal we'd like to see is how we can get our tenants connected at home. So we're using again our clout and our size to have some discussions. Too early to come back to you with what might come out of that, but potentially some exciting rewards for our tenants and potentially for the wider sector tenants. Does that cover your point?
Well, I think it's encouraging that there is an ability to be flexible, I suppose. And I know a lot of the older estates, you would have a small number of housing executive properties and a large number of owner-occupied. And I'm just wondering, I noticed solar panels going on to some of the owner-occupied properties, but nothing. And I just wonder, in terms of community planning and the outreach work, could there be an opportunity then for the housing executive to take a lead role to work in partnership so that the whole estate, if you like, can benefit?
Absolutely. Sorry, Donald.
Yeah, no, that's all right. No, I think Jerry was going to come in.
Yeah, I was going to say, as part of our moving forward with the restructuring of the provision of council services, you know, there's a key challenge there for us to make sure that we link in directly to the new super councils. Their future is about developing community planning. But a key component of community planning is good housing.
Yeah.
So I think it's incumbent on us to develop those links and moving forward and to look across the piece. We've sold over half of our stock. So virtually every second house in housing executive estate is now a private property. So as we develop a space in terms of moving forward, where we look to improve services for our tenants, there is a space there for us to look at about the provision of services for all the people in that locality. And part of that is about developing partnerships with the councils as you move forward in doing that.
But our neighbourhoods have tenants and residents. We need to look at it as just one community that we work together and try and take everyone with us. Delivering some of that investment, it's critical. Again, we've got our residents hand in hand. There's a useful bit as well. We are the grant administration body for owners. So some of the investment plans, again, once we get the funding, part of our challenge will be how do we look after our residents and help them be able to pay for some of the works that they need as well, but they've got the extra challenge of you need to put your hand in your pocket for some of this, so how can we create kind of grant help to take people with us in those?
Okay, thank you. Gregory?
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. Sorry I was a bit late. Just on the issue of Mickey Brady raised about the stock transfer procedure, has any work been done on the issue of how people feel? I've had several people from different estates, just in terms of, like, I suppose, the equivalent of an EQIA. These are people who would say to me, look, I've been living in a housing executive property in a by and large housing executive estate for a long time, but the fabric of my property is deteriorating, and there is the proposition that we transfer and hopefully get a better property. But they then do a little bit of research and they come to the conclusion that if they do that, they're going to pay additional rent. And because each of these separate people that I've spoken to are working, they see themselves as being disadvantaged if they go along with that. And their neighbour, whom they believe not to be working, they will say, well, that neighbour will vote yes because they will get a better house, which they need and should get, but it won't cost them anything. I'm in two minds about whether I should vote yes because I want the better house, but I'm going to have to pay extra for it. Has any sort of assessment been done about how that affects the different tenants in their different capacities?
I think the issue we have at the moment is that there is in theory a stock transfer programme. It's not moving forward because we have little interest from housing associations to do it, because the amount of investment, even with their rent levels, they say doesn't work for them. So at the moment, we are going back to the department to talk to them about how do we resolve this issue? How do we revisit it? Because you're quite right, it's a problem. Those properties need investment. How do we find it? And I think this will be a continuing theme that we will bring back to you, for not just the stock transfer, for our own estates. I think on the Ringmoor transfer, there were guarantees about rent levels. They were set out when the vote took place, so tenants knew what they were voting for in the sense of what rents they would pay when the work was done. And that's how it tends to work in practice when you do the stock transfers.
Sorry, if I could just interrupt you there. On the Ringmoor project, was any analysis done there about the tenancy types that would maybe change now, but at that time when the vote was going through, was there any analysis done then of the type of tenancy that would have attracted the attention that I'm talking about, the differential?
I don't know that, but Jerry might.
I don't have the specifics, but the point you make is valid, is that if you're protected through housing benefit, the rents go up and protected. But if you're those people, and for most cases you're talking about 30%, 25-30% of the occupants who have to find that extra £5 or £10 per week. We haven't revisited that, but it was an issue for some people. And that's part of the process we're reviewing in terms as we move forward. Can we find another means of investing in the stock that meets the requirement? And if so, then everybody's treated in the same fashion. But the capacity for us to borrow is limited. And associations, their rents are a direct reflection of the rates they're paying to borrow the money to invest in the stock. And hence you find that difference. And Ringmoor would be a good example of that.
Ringmoor, we did some review at the request of our board, just to make sure all of the promises that were given by the association that was taking the stock were delivered. So we were able to go back, and I think on rent they actually did better than the proposals. But you're making a very, very valid point. When you go to transfer, the transfer process, the ballot process, doesn't differentiate that very serious impact for individuals of money out your own pocket and money not. Every tenant is entitled to have their say, and they generally will go on, not splitting out who's physically paying. The sense being is any of us could end up needing help with our rent at some stage, so it doesn't split out who's the rent payers from who's getting a bit of help with their rent.
Okay. Just one other question. You had said there in the conclusion, the first sentence is the housing executive now wants to get our focus back to doing great things for Northern Ireland. Well, just looking at the housing executive as an entity, I mean, you employ about 3,000 people.
3,500.
3,500, yeah, which means you're a fairly substantial employer in Northern Ireland terms. Now, I've been doing some work with senior officials in terms of the community background of the employees of the Housing Executive, because, as you're probably aware, there's been a serious problem over 15, 20 years in terms of the community background, because the people who have been recruited to the Housing Executive over now several decades, just about a third of them are from the Protestant community, which is seriously underrepresented. And that has changed just slightly in recent years. Looking ahead, if you're trying to do great things for Northern Ireland, how are you going to try and address that underrepresentation? Given that, 50, 60, 70 years ago, any large body wouldn't have had all of the structures in place to monitor, to advise, to offer assistance, to have commissions that could come along and give you advice. But now you do have all that, as everybody else does, which should make it less likely that you have a workforce that is seriously underrepresented. But that is the case and has been the case for a number of decades. But what's it going to be like in the future, assuming, things evolve?
We've got lots of work to do on workforce plan. As I said, the bit for us is making sure the business keeps running and keeps delivering well. As we build those workforce plans, then we need to take cognizance of legislation, take equalities advice, make sure we've got the right skills though, and the right people with the right skills to move forward. So we will have a fair balancing act to go through, but we'll be ensuring we keep compliant and take advice as appropriate on equalities issues. But I've got an awful lot of work to do to have that first focus on making sure customers are served.
Okay.
Okay, fair enough. Could I just add, before bringing Frank on, and just to follow up on Gregory's earlier question, around the stock transfer, and I don't want to be taking the meeting down the discussion around stock transfer in detail, but I think it is relevant in terms of the programme, all right, the modernisation programme, just in the context of the issue around maybe a bit more clarity around if you can wait, you may not be able to, the tenants who may have, be able to take a decision for stock transfer regardless of any potential rent increase, others may have to weigh that up in their own minds and within their own budget. So maybe a little bit more thought on that. But also in terms of the stock transfer, and I should probably know this, but in terms of stock transfer, is there any part of the corporate debt also transferred to someone else? Because obviously that would impact on the costings.
No, I don't think it does. They usually, the arrangement is usually that it's transferred with grant, the Housing Association grant. And it's a free transfer plus grant. But I think they're still finding that a difficult equation, given the amount of investment required, which is why we need to go back to the department and discuss how we can move it forward.
Okay, no, thanks, Phil. Appreciate that. Okay, Frank McCann.
And just a comment, first of all, and that raised the bit that Gregory tried to lay out there, but I think we all hope across many departments and many companies that there is an equality employment for everybody, regardless of where it is and where it's set. And I think there are many problems within many different companies now. But to go back, well, I'll not touch on the stock transfer. See, listening to reading the document this morning and listening to it, it seems all good stuff. But I like mentioning an issue at the start of this, and that is with the transformation, as you call it, within the Housing Executive, that we're being offered a fait accompli, because it fits in with the Minister's vision of what he sees housing in the future, and that is the strategic element, the strategic and regional element of the Housing Executive and the landlord, in preparation for the division of the Housing Executive and whatever housing associations may come. Now, I have no doubt in my mind, could be wrong, that that's why Donald was brought in the first place, and I was to oversee it. See, one of the difficulties I have is every time I listen to Donald, he continues to run down the housing executive. He may come off with some niceties about, well, they were a good organisation, but they've been particularly bad, and that has had a particular issue with many of the people that work within the housing executive. Now, I have no doubt that there was problems, and problems remain within the senior levels of the housing executive, and some of the problems are at. But if you keep telling people at every level that they have been a problem and that they have created something that's bad, you know, morale will hit rock bottom, and that is what happened. He said last week, Mags, that you've been at pains to go out and try to raise the morale of people within it. But even this morning, when Donald opened up, he talked about this big bad organisation, and then within that I have a difficulty. And because there may be problems, there may be people within it that created them problems, but by and large the organisation itself was a good organisation. It might need tweaks, it might need changed, but I think what we need to do is to stop the flow of people out of the housing executive, because at regional level and at district level, and I know you spoke about the age thing, that there are people who are drifting and who have asked for early retirement, whose experience and expertise are being lost, mostly because of some of the utterances of Donald since he came into the thing, and that poses a problem for people. It certainly poses a problem for me, because it has an impact on the work that's been delivered within the housing executive itself. Now, Donald was brought in, yourself was brought in, Mike, to deliver what you call as change within the housing executive. What is the difference between what you are doing now in terms of soft split, the regional or strategic body, and the proposals that the department and the minister are pushing forward in the future of housing?
Yeah, well, I'm not aware that I am running down the housing executive. The housing executive has got problems. It's had problems. We are going to put them all right. That's what we're here to do. That's what I'm anxious to do. I have a background in social housing. I'm here because I believe in social housing, and I want to make certain that the tenants in our stock get decent homes and decent services, and that we also run the regional services very well. That's what we're here to do. I try to explain that I think it's important that we focus. The social housing reform programme is a matter for you politicians to argue amongst yourselves. My job is to ensure the leadership of the housing executive delivers good quality services across the board. And as I've explained to you, it's much more effective to do that if you focus on the landlord and its work. You focus on supporting people in its work, you focus on housing benefit, how they're doing it. And that's what we're about to do. Now, the other thing that I would say to you is the social housing reform, the lesson I've learned from Northern Ireland, things don't move that quickly. I know perfectly well that these discussions will take time. Therefore, my task is to ensure the housing executive performs. That's what I'm here for. That's the only reason, as I understand it. It is not to deliver a reform programme which I don't know where it will end up. It's not my task.
I think in terms of the staff bit, Donald has come along to a fair amount of the events just to be there at the start, give staff that message that the board are behind them on what we're setting out. So I've certainly had Donald along to give staff that message of you're doing great things and we want to give you space to do more of those. The fait accompli kind of issues, my role, and you'll probably know my CV, working in Glasgow, it was 5 years ago, taking GHA that had a lot of difficult early years, and I worked there at the time, and I saw great staff still doing great things, but the organisation's reputation had been affected by the actions of a few kind of relationships that had gone badly wrong. I spent a great 5 years just working with the teams and leaving that organisation back on top. in Glasgow, top performing, delivering for customers, staff in a good place, but really delivering what it was supposed to be doing. And that's why I'm hopefully here to help this organisation do the same thing, get the past in the past and just move forward to deliver. In terms of reform, I am on the programme board. I think fair to say the staff feeling is that first year a discussion. We were outside the door in terms of being able to inform any discussions, and that was a lot of the Glasgow experience of what went wrong. You don't do change to an organisation. You need the people that have the expertise giving their views, our tenants giving their views in that process. So that's my role, I would say, on the reform. I've got the housing exec to look after first and foremost, and then working with the department to make sure anything that comes through in that is shaped and informed by the people that are running the organisation. I came in, Chair, for example, these sessions I've been doing. It was kind of shocking to hear the worry from the staff saying if things change in the future, we'll all lose our job. So I've been kind of clear with them, if there are 3,500 housing professionals running the service, vast majority doing a great job. So if there was ever a decision by the Assembly to change the structure, the name over the door, it's the same professionals that will run any new service. So for our staff is, those discussions will happen, but we got a service to run, and let's do it really well. And any of the other discussions, we've got a voice, and we've got something to contribute.
I'll just make one more comment on that, and I've no doubt that we'll pick up on that over a period of time. That we've raised the concerns at this committee that there was a number of options on the table for discussion in regard to the social housing reform programme, but the options were limited. To all accounts, and it's not only within this committee, but you talk to quite a number of housing organisations and your own staff, that there is that belief. Now, people may look at the housing exam and say, well, let's look at the soft split and let's look at the thing. From where I'm sitting and from listening to the department, listening to the minister, there is little difference, although it'll be taken a stage further, little difference from what's being proposed in the regional strategic arm, the landlord arm, and for what's being proposed. And so people believe that the road is being paved at the minute to allow the ministers' impression of what housing should be like down the road. And that for us, certainly for some of this committee, that poses real difficulties. Now, to go back in preparations for the soft split, and I know that you talked about social enterprise, you talked about things, and I've also been working in social housing for 30 years. I live in a social housing estate in West Belfast, so I know something about what goes on in the thing. But I know that in preparation for the soft split, or the reason it's the strategic arm, that people have been told in district office, their main objective is to clear rents, is to go after people in arrears. And I think Gregory touched on the thing, coming up from a different thing, that nearly 80% of the people are on housing benefit. Many of them are in social need. Many of them are being put under pressure to try and to come together. Many of them are being taken to court at the present time. What they've been told, and when you argue their case, said, well, look, just let's take it to court, let's establish that they're in arrears, but it makes it much easier for them to be evicted in the future. And then there are many people have also been told that in terms of working within the social enterprise or within the community, and that it's not their job to pursue that. What everything is to do is, and focusing towards, is the separation or the soft split within the housing executive. But do you not also understand, from where coming from, that we see little difference between usually in the preparations for this and what the minister and the department are pushing ahead on?
I maybe just respond to that as the person who's running the landlord side of the housing executive. I certainly have found a space to give a better focus to delivering services to the landlord. Prior to our reorganisation, I looked after housing benefit and the whole piece on homelessness. And the big benefit for me is I'm totally focused on delivering the best possible services for our tenants, which includes, for me, for example, all our asset management work is now in the one place. Prior to January, I didn't look after the big plan schemes. I looked after day-to-day maintenance. So I had maintenance officers who were in our properties on a daily basis. We had people carrying out work on a plan basis. I wasn't responsible for them. They're now all put together. There's a challenge there for us to make sure we get the best out of that. And in terms of dealing with the tenants, I understand where you're coming from. Our work is about prevention. We turn over 6,000 or 7,000 properties a year. Each new tenant, we're taking a different approach with them now. We're trying to sit down with them so that they fully understand what's expected of them to run a home. Because we found many of the people who come to access the social sector, don't have those skills about running a home for the first time, and they're immediately into difficulties about not paying their rent or not paying other bills. So we're trying to upfront work with them in terms of secure a better understanding what it takes for you to manage a property. So we're in there in the preventative business. There'll always be cases at the end of the day where some people don't pay their rent, and we want to be in a space where those tend to be the exception rather than the rule. So people put value in getting a social home. We talked earlier about there's 20,000 people in housing stress looking access to a social home. So people should put value in when they get a home from us or a housing association. And I think the job for us is, in moving forward, is that people understand that and that we provide them with help and assistance. The Chairman talked earlier about people not taking up on tenancies because they have no furniture. Increasingly we're finding that. So we have done a whole pilot, for example, in the South region about sustaining tenancies, where we have been doing work with charitable organisations to provide furniture for people on the day of the stay in their tenancy so they can move in and get covered by housing benefit. That's a big challenge, but there are people out there willing to work with us, and we're developing new skills and working with them. So we're in a different space. It's only 4 months for me since I've taken this over, and I think no doubt if we're back in 6 months' time we'll have a better story to tell. But I think as we move forward as a landlord, I'm talking about moving forward as a landlord, I think we'll be in a better place to give better services to the public, and that's what I'm here for. And I would welcome the opportunity to be back here on a regular basis to talk about the good news.
I would say for committee, please be assured, for my senior team, we're one team right through the organisation. That's why these staff sessions, it's everyone together, because everything we do is interlinked. The split though gives us a wee bit of space. For example, my regional director, her sole focus is 2,000 new starts from the housing associations. So it's given her the space to focus with her team on working with the associations on we must deliver on that front. That doesn't detract again from us being part of one organisation. It's just giving everyone space to, we know what we're doing, but we come together with one housing executive.
And I just want to emphasise, the board are fully committed, standing right behind and supporting this work. I've been to some of the MAGS's presentations. I always go out and visit. I meet the staff. I talk to them. I very often come back and have a go at Jerry about something I find in every office about how the service works, because I know how they work. And it's very important that we have a simple structures that focus on delivery. And that is essentially what all the Journey to Excellence is, and giving people responsibility to get on with the job because they've got the skills to do it, and having that accountability.
Okay. Probably you want back in again?
First of all, nobody has answered my question. Are you preparing the ground for the Minister's strategy?
No.
So why does it fit in neatly with what the Minister's saying and between the split and then now? The split was talked about before you came out and then in the post. So would you believe that people would be suspicious when they look at the road user going down and the road the Minister and his department's going down?
I mean, I can understand where you're coming from, and you can see the same thing. All I can say is what I'm trying to do is what is sensible for the housing executive to deliver on what it has to do. And as Jerry says, he's now the Director of Landlord Services. It's his sole focus. Before it wasn't. We've simplified the structures. We've made people accountable for particular areas of work. It will work better. We'll come back in time and explain. But the social housing reform programme is something we have to contribute to because the department asked us to, but it's not something we're driving. It's not our. I'm not here to drive that. I have a long record in social housing. I've chaired a housing committee with public money, which delivered 3,000 homes a year. I ran housing associations, which first did it all with public money and then later with public and private money. I don't care where the money comes from. I just think we need to make certain that we invest in our homes for social tenants where they need it. And that is what we're aiming to do. Our job is to actually represent to you as politicians the need for people to have good, decent homes and to find the resources to deliver that.
And the final point is what Jerry said about housing benefit. Jerry, there are people that are in arrears or being sent for that they're been told before there'll be any discussions they need to go out and get £500, £1,000 and more before they'll even discuss with them the paying off arrears. That puts people deeply in debt. They've been taken to court right across the north. They've been taken to court to get a court order against them, so that if they go into arrears again, this is about putting a loaf of bread on your table or paying your rent. There has to be a happy medium there, and it's not as rosy as you paint it out.
No, I would never say it'd be rosy. It's a challenging environment for people to find a way to pay the rent. I would never say that.
Challenging to send people out to borrow money.
So it's a matter about working with our tenants, but I wouldn't avoid the fact that at the end of the day there will be cases where people, we understand, have the ability to pay who don't pay, and I don't think it's right that should happen.
Okay, Stuart.
Thank you, Chair. And I appreciate what we've been hearing from all three of you this morning. On your journey to excellence, of three areas I want to cover with you. On your journey to excellence, have you identified, and if you have, what action have you taken where areas of work may actually be outsourced by the housing executive? That's one area. The second one is, Mags, you made reference to ensuring that the spend is done. And I appreciate that you must have been, as an organisation, stung by the failure to spend in the past. But can we be assured, and more importantly, can the taxpayers be assured, that the drive to spend is a value for money spend, and that we're not going to find ourselves, or you're going to find yourselves in front of the Public Accounts Committee having bought things that are nonsensical and spent money in a way that isn't practical or feasible? So moving from underspend, we are criticised, to confirming to us today that you are actually going to achieve the spend, we need to be satisfied that that is an appropriate and proportionate spend, and it's one that delivers value for money for customers. The final area is the comment that Gregory was referring to in terms of the staff of the organisation, community background and all of that. Can you just provide an absolute assurance for everyone that every employee of the housing executive is valued regardless of their community background, race or sexual orientation, and that people are employed on the basis of their ability to do the job and no other reason? Thank you.
Outsourced, there's nothing on our immediate agenda there. As we go through the process, we'll see again making sure we are the best at doing what we do. If opportunities present, we'll look at that. There are some aspects, for example, on our IT service, we have partnerships with other IT providers that can do it better and cheaper and be able to react to our different needs better than setting up a really large internal team. So outsourcing, there's nothing specific on the agenda new there, and if any opportunities come along, we would look at it and impacts on staff from that. The spend, you make a valid point. I went through last week with you the efforts we've made to get control back of how we do our business, and that we have lots still to do on that. So what I can't do is put in jeopardy any of the assurance work we've done to date. The meetings we had with our contractors, the consultants that will support and assure a lot of the programme, and our own internal team this week, is we have a job to do, and we've got tenants that are now waiting for investment. So how quickly can we mobilise to deliver? And asking our partnerships of our staff, our contractors and our consultants to look at the programme, give me assurance we can spend, and all the assurance that sits behind that. And if there are better ways of doing things that still keep the business safe, tell me about it. and arrears are open. So we had a half day, and over the coming weeks we're just going to be working through. And if they come back saying they could spend even more again, not just the programme, then I'll be back to the department with another conversation. So it's absolute certainty for you and for me. My credibility is with this new part of the journey, making sure we spend and spend well, value for money. Everyone in the room was very clear that we can't compromise with that because reputations have been damaged, and we want to now move forward. And for the scrutiny role of this committee, you always be certain that we're doing the right thing. For staff feeling valued, absolutely. I'm not of this jurisdiction, so I'm coming into this just in terms of providing leadership to everyone having a role to play, everyone being given the space to do it, and getting the direction and the recognition when things go well. And we're a big organisation, I'm sure along the way, staff, we have to get them confident of kind of trying brave things again, and there'll be some mistakes made in that. There'll hopefully be small learning mistakes. That's the bit of good learning organisations. But people encouraged to use their brain and bring all their talent to work with them, and valued for the great things that I'm certain we're going to be doing again pretty soon.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Hey, Michael, final member.
Thanks, Chair. And please, folks, don't take this as criticism. In my life, I've seen more all singing, all dancing plans, all of which would rival West End productions, and all of which have one thing in common. If the money ain't there to make them work, they're not worth the paper they're printed on. And I want to go back to something that the Chair said, because I'm quite focused on this. I know something about house building, I know something about the financing of house building. It strikes me that 88,000 properties, 2,800 in this current tranche of stock transfer, which is, round terms, just over 3, maybe 4%. And each one of those properties will, as the Chair has said, have a debt apportioned to it. I can't understand the business sense in, if I'm following this correctly, in transferring the asset, which is the property, but keeping the debt. Because that debt will then be spread across an increasingly reducing number of properties and assets, and there will come a tipping point where the liabilities actually exceed, on paper, the business strength of the organisation itself. And at that stage, you have the fait accompli that Fra is referring to. Do you have figures available for the asset liability ratio, and what way is it going? Because I strongly suspect that your asset base is going down and the debt attached to that per unit is actually increasing, and that must be unsustainable. If what pertains in the private sector works the same, it must come to a tipping point.
We're not allowed to borrow, and we're paying back our debt. So actually our debt is falling very significantly. I think, I may not quite got the figures right, but I think it's about 112 million loan charges to pay, of which 2/3 is actually repayment of capital. So actually our debt is declining. Now, when you look at stock transfer, it's not transferred with debt, it's just transferred.
Yeah, but there must be a debt apportion. There must be a debt apportion to it. The asset that you have must have cost you something to build and construct.
Well, it's a generic, total figure. We don't. It's not.
No.
It's not.
I understand that, but if you sell 2 to 4% of your assets, and the debt that you have remains the same, then the debt remaining against the remaining assets must increase per unit.
Yes.
And there must then come a point where the debt exceeds the asset value.
Well, I think not in our case, because we've got 88,000 units and the debt is
It doesn't matter if you have 2 million. There will come a point at some stage where it'll cross over. And I'm just wondering, will that in itself, I don't know, I wouldn't mind saying that you've 88,000 properties now. How many had you before you started selling and asset transferring?
Well, we've sold in the life of the housing sector, we've sold over 100,000 properties.
Many?
Over 100,000 properties have been sold. I remember a time the housing sector had stock at 140,000. We all remember that.
Yeah.
In recent times, that has collapsed since 2007. The market collapsed and we stopped selling our properties.
There will come a tipping point. And is the actual, are there variations of debt within the executive? Would there be historical debt? Would there be, at what level, how many variations of debt have you and what's the total amounts?
I wouldn't have it in front of me, but we've got different loans. A lot of the loans, as you say, most of the loans are historic because we haven't been borrowing. So there is a debt portfolio and we pay off as we go along. So debt is reducing. I think this takes you into your...
I think you're moving into the arena of
social housing
reform programme and what you might do with overall stock and all the rest, and then the whole financial constraints around all that. So we're kind of moving off the modernisation programme.
I'll write to you privately.
I mean, we're told early on there's no debt transfer with the stock, so you hold on to that as a kind of corporate sense, if I understand the answer. Okay. You finished, Michael, or yeah?
Yeah.
Well, and there's no other members indicating to speak, so just a couple of, I think, obviously, again, you can hear there's an underlying scepticism around some of the members on the table, and that's because all the members around the table will have a fairly significant constituency load around housing. And I mean, obviously, Charlie would know people would have spoke to a number of all of us probably at some point. So a lot of members do deal with housing issues virtually on a daily basis as elected representatives. So in the end of the day, you deal with both applicants or tenants and housing officials. And for the most part, everybody's relationships are very, very positive and very constructive. But we obviously have to measure things as we deal with them in reality on the ground. And I think, as maybe Fra made the point, obviously you presented a very positive picture there early on, notwithstanding the challenges that you have also outlined. So we're very glad. I think members are pleased to hear all of that. But obviously, as time goes on, members will measure what we're being told with what we're meeting face to face as we continue our jobs as elected reps, and obviously the very important role of scrutinising this. So you've heard a number of obviously staffing issues raised this morning again, and you've responded to that, and that includes obviously issues of morale and so on. The whole question of tenant satisfaction, I think you've focused on the clear distinction of the kind of clear delineation of the roles for both officials, whether you call that within a soft split or otherwise. The need for investment in houses, I think we're all very focused on that as well. We all understand that. So I suppose for us, obviously we're very pleased to have the presentation with you this morning and look forward to an ongoing very constructive engagement with yourselves in relation to this programme. As I said early on, it kind of put in around some scepticism, and that's fair enough. That's what we're here to do, to scrutinise and challenge. But we're also here to work with you to make sure we get the best outcomes for the people that we all represent. In your case, the tenants; in our case, the people that we would collectively represent. So could I thank you, unless there's anything else you want to add, Donald, Bags or Jerry, this morning?
Thank you for your time, and we're very happy to come back and talk to you about how we're progressing.
Okay, so thanks very much, and we'll look forward to working with you in the time ahead.
Thanks.
Thank you. Members. Moving on then, members, to the next item on the agenda, which is item number 6. Which is this is the habitual Social Security habitual residence amendment. Now, if members recall, when the committee considered this SL1 on the 20th of March, the committee voted against the regulations being made, and I mean, I'm presuming that I don't know about the committee, but I mean, I presume there will still be some of the same objections on the table. So, if I'm working on the basis that there's still same, I mean, you indicate that there would certainly be your objections. So, on that basis, then we'll move. Then, if members are content, then rather than go through the motion around the content for the motion, because clearly people aren't, we'll then move to a vote on whether or not you would want to pray an annulment. So we take that vote first.
Chairman, just for you to know, with no members of staff here, and I wasn't present for the last one, but straightforward vote, obviously. But what, assuming if there is a similar type of vote looking around, it may well be the case, unless people have changed. But what's the consequence post the vote?
Chair, the consequence. If there's there's a motion for recommends that it's negative resolution, as you're aware, so that there'll be, in order for if the committee still objects to this particular statutory rule, then there'll be a motion that the committee would recommend, consider the statutory rule and would recommend that's annulled by the Assembly. That motion would then be laid in the Business Office, it would be scheduled for debate in the Assembly and would then be voted on in the Assembly. So, in effect, the committee would be taking that recommendation to the Assembly for the Assembly to decide.
Yeah. But when would that be?
It would have to be before the 7th of June, because that's the end of the statutory period. So if the committee agrees that it recommends that that this statute will be annulled by Assembly, that would be maybe this afternoon or tomorrow, we'll lodge in the Business Office, and then the Business Committee would schedule that before the 17th of June.
No, it's just with the European election and business been late over the course of the next week. I didn't know how that affected. So it's probably then the week before the 17th, would it be?
Yes, I would say it would be early June.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so members understand then, we're just going to move swiftly then to the proposal, and I'll read this in the record. And if this motion, if I understand my ruling on it, my briefing on this, if I'm going to put a motion that the Assembly seeks a prayer of annulment, and if that passes, then so be it, that'll go straight, as Kevin says, through the Business Office. If it doesn't pass, then I'll put the original motion, but to say the committee's contented to rule it. Yeah, that's clear as mud. All right, so therefore that the Committee for Social Development has considered the statutory rule SR 133/2014, the Social Security Habitual Residence Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2014, and recommends that it be annulled by the Assembly. All those in favour of that motion? Those against? Okay.
Motion successful.
Motion is successful. Okay, so thanks members for that. And then, as Kevin said, that'll be lodged with the Business Office for scheduling in the Assembly. Okay, members, thank you for that. Moving on then to the next item, to draw your attention to the correspondence memo on page 33 of your electronic pack. Members, are you content then to note the correspondence by the memo? Take that as agreement?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So the next item is forward work programme. Again, you'll have that draft programme in. Sorry, it's on page 58 of your tabled items. So it's just should be sitting at the desk in front of you. Okay.
Chair, I just wondered, in terms of taking evidence at some or maybe it's not about taking evidence, but there were some people who had wanted to present to committee, CAJ for example, and whether or not it is going to be scheduled in this term before summer recess, or whether it's part of a wider consultation exercise.
There's a number of things to be dealt with, including the inquiry and including sort of a number of requests for presentations. So we're just trying to work our way through. That's why, to be honest with you, I always look at these forward work programmes as an indicator rather than definitive, because it would need to be changing. And we are going to have to come to some serious discussions in the next short number of weeks, and particularly as we head into the session after summer, because quite clearly we want to. You know, what members are aware, I mean, obviously there is the inquiry there, we want to expedite that and get it concluded as quickly as possible, because we have other legislation and we have other matters which we do want to shape the policy in terms of working with the executive and the department of the minister. Gregory?
Yeah, I'm just looking at the inquiry issues, 9th of May, 5th of June, and then 19th of June. Is that, the way it's worded there, is that reviewing evidence thus far and then hoping to start phase 3? Is that what that really means, or what?
Well, we need to find a date on which we actually take stock of phase 1, phase 2, because I think obviously what we want to try to do is, you know, yourself, we want to try and take stock where we're at, because there are issues around the BBC, there are issues around Michael Sands, there are other issues around whatever outstanding evidence there might require to be held. And then we also then want to look at, in terms of phase 3, what are the witnesses we think we might need, what information we need. So I think we actually need a longer dedicated session to actually kind of try and plan that out, so that we can at least schedule phase 3 or immediately on return after the summer, but having notified all of those potential witnesses that they would be required to attend. And then, so as we can kind of then, expedite that, quickly, so that we're not coming back every week. When we start off the summer and then working out we maybe would need for evidence, so we'll do all that in advance. And that, in other words, we need a session, whether it's on the 19th or not, but to front load the rest of the inquiry by having all the ducks in a row.
Right. It's just, if we aren't able to do it on the 19th, and I agree, I think we do need I think we need a session to review evidence thus far and then plan ahead, because I've said on a number of occasions previously, I think the committee needs to look at strategic objectives in terms of the overall ambit that come under the committee. And this inquiry has bogged us down, and whatever point, whether it's mid or late June, it'll be round about the first anniversary of us having set up this inquiry that we'll be looking at that. That's the first anniversary. I don't know whether people are anticipating a second anniversary, but that's the way it's looking. And we have to take a decision. The committee wants to look at strategic views about the overall ambit of DSD stuff, or continue to go on into the quicksand and the mire of this stuff, and draw a conclusion about where are we going to go to, what are we going to get out of this, and set that against what we're losing by not being able to take a strategic.
Well, I think, from my position, I've been very clear on the need, and that's why I've sort of tried to have the planning days for the committee to actually get a focus on all of the other work that we have to do. And there's a lot of outstanding work, and there will be legislation coming down fairly soon as well. So we need to get back into business. So it's not in anybody's interest, in my opinion, for the thing to drag on any time unnecessarily at all. So I do think we do need to be coming to conclusions certainly by the end of June. So we will just try to set these in. Some of it's a little bit variable because of legal advice and all the rest of that, and we can't second guess the mind of the committee what they might want to do, but certainly I would have a view that we'd like to try to, as far as possible, do our up in 1 and 2 phases before the end of the summer, before the start of the summer recess, so that we're kicking into phase 3 immediately after the summer recess and wrap that up. And if we give ourselves enough time, I don't see any reason why we can't do it by Christmas. I personally can't see if we give ourselves the time for that. As members of the group, we're going to have to dedicate more time anyway, because it's in our interest to get the thing done and dusted, whatever the outcome. That'll just take its own course, because we have, as you rightly say, a lot of other work which the committee needs to be getting its mind focused on, because there's a lot of very important policies, not least the whole issue around housing, and again there will be other legislation. I understand we're getting legislation on alcohol reform, alcohol licensing reform, gambling reform, housing regeneration, so on and so forth. So there's a lot of work that this committee rightly has indicated from day one wants to have a role in shaping those policy outcomes, and that's what we should be getting into. So
just on the BBC, Chairman, are we still at the same position we were, or has it moved on?
Well, we're going to take the legal advice, and we couldn't get that scheduled because of the timing of it, and next week the committee and all. So it'll be scheduled. That's why I'm saying that's one of the variables, because people have to make their mind up. Are you going to challenge it, basically, or move on, at least for now. Okay, members. So members had a look at the forward programme and noted that, and then under any other business, anything under any other business. Mickey, you had raised that thing around the stock transfer. You told me this morning you were looking at this. But I think you've raised it this morning, you've got a response. I think it's something that we do need to put in terms of our overall consideration of housing matters. So can we take it that you've raised it, you wanted it raised? And again, we'll find that shelter schedule. Might need a briefing or so from
just the point that Gregory raised about the housing benefit and people who, because you could have somebody who's working poor, essentially who's slightly above benefit level, who may not qualify for housing benefit, and are actually going to be worse off than somebody in benefit, it seems.
But
a very inequitable way of doing things. So there are other issues to be addressed. It's maybe wider than it was originally thought.
Well, I think if we can get some sense of a recap of where the housing stock transfer actually is. The board had approved maybe up to 2,500, but what we're hearing and increasing, and certainly would be my understanding, that most that's not actually likely to happen because of the finances. So it may be useful that we're not looking at a policy proposal to stock transfer, which isn't going to happen, so let's try and clear the error on that one. So we'll factor that in and we'll try and get a briefing on that. Okay, members, so...
All right, Chair, can I just put in Trevor Clark's apology? He had texted me, but the meeting had just started.
Oh, sorry, okay, so we'll record the apologies for Trevor. Can I say that I understand, when we heard this late this morning, that Alison's moving to another committee responsibility in the next...
There you go.
Can I say that you'd be a great loss to this committee and a very wonderful gain for the Environment Committee. So good luck, Alison.
Who are we getting?
And your new...
And Chair, can I say, as someone who sat on the DOE committee for some time, we have our sincere...
On that stage, you just rolled her eyes over and you turned your head. Pot kettle type of thing. Anyway, not to worry. Okay, so Alison, good luck anyway. Thanks very much for all your support to the members. Okay.
Thank you.
And I won't tell them what you said about them all. All right. Okay, members, so that meeting stands adjourned the next part of the week after.
Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly, Committee Room 29.